Let's take a look at how these scripts actually function. I'm going to start with the MyroController. This is a script that has a few setups with the variables. It has some Myro control variants, which are responsible for controlling the player outside of normal control circumstances. You also have some private variables that are used for internal functionalities, but these are the serialized values that can be placed in and will allow you to control the default charge and the default fire breath, but they can be replaced later on. You also have internal references to the Myro animator, and this is an instance, so you can call this whenever you want from whatever part of the code logic. This is functionally a global access point. So we set this as in awake as a singleton so that the instance is callable. Then in start, what we do is we look for the main camera and we see if it has a camera control component. If it does not, then we add a camera control component to the main camera, and then we call that camera control component and set the follow target. This way, no matter what, the camera is going to be following the player. We also self-assign the Myro animator and the Myro movement to the private variables. In the update function, what we do is we run some checks for charge, flook, and breath attacks. These can potentially be swapped out, and all of the functionality from this point forward is stored in regions. A region works by doing hashtag region, and then you can give it a name, and then what it will do is it will let you collapse everything between region and hashtag end region. You can see the way that run flook works is there's a local function, is flook key pressed. You'll remember from our architecture that MyroController contains this as a cipher function, so the MyroController can reference it, but so can the other functionalities. So is the flook key pressed? And if there is an flook control variant and it's not currently being controlled by another variant, then what we do is we assign the variant. We have a similar functionality for the charge, with the exception that if we add an alternate control, which means, let's say we wanted to use supercharge, supercharge would take precedence over the regular charge. Additionally, if we add any other kind of fire breath or breath attack, then that will take precedence over the default fire breath control variant. So these functions control the input and functionality that triggers charging, breathing, and using flook. We also have some accessible functions for setting the alternate controls. In this case, we have a function assign control variants where some external functionality, a pair of arches that you walk through that contain a flight alternate control, would be able to call myrocontroller.instance.assign control variant and give it the ability to fly via the way that this variant is put together. So what it does is it runs through some functionalities where it will clear any current variants that are happening, and it will then initialize the control variants that we're using, and it will then say we are currently using a control variant. Additionally, there's a function to end it with end control variant, where it goes through a series of functionalities that end the non-default behavior and return the player to a default behavior. We have a middle function called swap control variant, which enables us to jump from one variant to another variant to have a more complex set of variant controls. This is important for enabling us to do something like a power jump into a fly. That's that's just something that would be a more interesting functionality than just having one-off control variants. We also have the ability to change the default behavior to breath alternate variants and charge alternate variants. You can set the controls here with just a publicly accessible return your guide to normal. You can have all of your key presses registered here, where basically it just returns a Boolean value if turn right movement key is done. So this is where we could potentially add um, if the D key is pressed, but let's also add the right arrow. We can add this here, and then anywhere else in my functionality, we can check and see, hey, is this done? And when we change the function, you can then turn with that additional key. So like maybe the arrow keys or something. Additionally, you have utility functions, and which just allows you to get access to the animator and the Myro movement. Usually the control variants will use this. And then death and revive functions, where if your player dies, this is something where the animator and the movement then receive fallout. This will probably be called by a combat functionality. That's how the MyroController works.